It's a monochrome, traditional, beautiful little country town. We now have forever, probably, the distinction of, having given the world a man who's turned out to be Australia's worst mass murderer at this point in time.
Ten days ago, Christchurch, New Zealand experienced an act of terror like none before. During Friday prayers, 50 Muslims at 2 separate mosques were shot dead, another 50 injured.
People, dead. People who were alive 5 minutes ago, just praying. They have done nothing. They have done nothing.
It was an attack calculated for the social media age. Intricately planned, filmed and streamed live online for a global audience.
My feeling is that he chose New Zealand because it was a soft target in terms of security. And perhaps he chose it to make a point, to illustrate that even a relatively tolerant, quiet society on the very edge of the world was not immune to terrorism.
The attack has exposed deep flaws in the counter-terrorism strategies of Western nations like New Zealand and Australia.
Authorities have absolutely failed to understand and grasp the threat of far-right extremism. The Christchurch shooter should absolutely not have fallen under the radar. And the fact that he did is evidence of a massive failing in global counter-terrorism strategies.
Tonight on Four Corners, we investigate the rise of right-wing extremism and ask, how did the killer fly under the radar, even after posting clues in plain sight? It was lunchtime in Hagley Park, central Christchurch. On Fridays, the city's tiny Muslim community comes together at the mosque on Deans Avenue.
Friday prayers time here is a really busy time. There's people everywhere, cars everywhere. It's really alive, particularly around lunchtime. When people are coming and going, and the mosque has been part of this community for forever, really. It's been here as long as all of our houses around here. They're part of our community. They're New Zealanders, and they're welcome here.
Former Imam Hisham El Zaini arrived early for Friday prayers.
As usual, I went inside the mosque and sat in my usual place. I usually sit in a particular certain place every time on Friday, which is the left-hand side front row of the mosque, to the extreme left-hand side.
It's a beautiful place.
Paranjit Singh and his wife Charu were at home a few doors down from the mosque.
My son goes for his kindi at 1:30. So I just packed him up, gave to my husband, said goodbyes. So I just came out to check the letter box. Some letters are there, some things are there, because I was expecting a courier from India. So when I came here, I just like this, I saw somebody moving around.
A man with a military-style semi-automatic rifle was walking towards the mosque.
We heard fire, shotguns. And at the beginning, I thought this was somebody shooting from the street because he wouldn't come inside to scare us off. There was a burst of fire, and then brief silence, then another burst, silence, then 2 or 3 bursts, each one about 15 shots. and it was getting closer. The entrance of the mosque is a small, narrow hall which is about 5-6 meters long. And then it goes into the main prayer hall. So people on that day, because the mosque is full, are sitting on the floor in that hall, in that corridor, and he was killing them. The fire was coming closer and closer, and you can see the sparkle of the fire coming when he's shooting. You can see this glow comes out. So he went back out to the main street, shot some people there, came back to the mosque, point blank killing people, then went out, got another gun, went back to the mosque, taking his time all the way, as if he knew the police was not coming. There was no rush at all in what he did.
Yasser Amin and his father arrived late for prayers.
We were walking down to the mosque, and on the way, I heard a gunshot. After the gunshot, I saw a guy who was climbing the wall. So definitely he was running away from the shooting. I saw him shooting the other guy who was climbing the wall. So definitely, in my mind, it was like he might shoot us as well. So we have to avoid that shooting. So that's why I told my dad to run away because it's shooting going on. We need to run away. So we ran to the other direction, and while he stopped there and with his gun, he started shooting on us. And I was a couple of steps ahead of my father. So while during shooting, I stopped because I stand down and I stopped to tell my father, please lay down. When I turned back, he was lying down. So I thought maybe he heard my voice. But at the same time, shooter, he drove away the car. And I realized when I gone back to my dad, and I realized, so there's a blood around his body. So he got a couple of bullets.
At first, nearby residents were oblivious to what had happened.
I just nipped out to the shops for a short time and came back down Deans Avenue about 9 minutes after the shooting started, and tried to get in from this end down here, and people saying, no, don't go down there, there's been a shooting. And so went right round Hagley Park, and as we were coming past the hospital, there were police everywhere with guns running around, ambulances that could hear. By the time we got up to this end of Deans Avenue, there were some ambulances there, there were people covered in blood, there were people out who'd come streaming out of the mosque who were just shell-shocked, devastated, people crying. I asked one young man, what had happened, and he said, there's been a shooting, I was in the mosque. He said, there are people dead everywhere. And I was just shocked, horrified, and I just held his arm and said, we're with you. Whatever happens, we're with you.
I see like that everyone is running on this way, and one body is on the footpath, and the one couple who is standing down here, she's pregnant lady, I think so 5 or 6 months, and we just take a water jar from a house and give both of them water, start helping them to the other people to give some water, because they now very not able to talk to anyone, but I just realized to help them.
Then we brought them inside and gave her everything. They had bruises on them. They survived. A man was bleeding. He helped him out, wiped his wounds and gave him bandage. We left our house to leave them to their own places. And we just gave them first aid, everything we can do.
That's when we saw the car that was just down there, and the people that were in that car had been going to the mosque, and the guy started shooting at them, the gunman, and the car's riddled with bullets, and all the windows are blown out, and they'd backed up the car in a hurry into our lane here. There was a guy out there dead, just lying there, you know, in his socks. He'd obviously tried to run away from the gunman and probably was coming through here to escape, and gunned down, just lying there, dead, just at the front of the lane there. Just shocking, absolutely shocking.
When the police asked you to come out, what did you see?
They asked us to stand up, hold our hands, and follow him in line. So we followed him in line, and as we were going outside, they were leading us outside the mosque. We found dead bodies on the ground, people we knew, lying on the ground dead. People you know, dead. People who were alive 5 minutes ago, just praying. They have done nothing. They have done nothing. This hatred has no place among human beings. Shouldn't.
As the extent of the carnage became apparent, police responded to reports of another attack at a second mosque 5 kilometres away. A fleet of ambulances rushed the injured to hospital. As night fell, Haroon Feroz arrived to visit his uncle, who'd been shot.
He tried to hide like on the corner by the door, and then there were like 2-3 dead bodies just dropped on top of him, and he was like just there, and then there was like blood all over him. So he just pretended that he's also dead until the guy like reloaded the magazine and then came for the second round. And that when he actually came for the second round, that's when he got shot twice. One just kissed him on the hip, and then the second one actually went on his back. And that's at that point he lost consciousness, and he was like in a lot of pain. But he stood still, and he just tried to just get through that moment, you know, which was the most terrifying moment that anyone can ever imagine. Very, very terrifying.
So he hid under the bodies? Under
the bodies, from what I understood, just to protect himself, because they were dead already, because they were like they were shot multiple times.
Police arrested 28-year-old Australian Brenton Tarrant 36 minutes after the shootings began.
Brenton Harrison Tarrant.
The next day, he appeared in court charged with murder.
Mr. Tarrant, you are remanded without plea. Next appearance will be in the Christchurch High Court on 5 April 2019 at 9:15 a.m. I've noted that you're not making an application to be admitted to bail. I've also noted that you're not making any application for suppression of publication of your name or of any particular that could lead to your identification.
Back, please, Your Honour. Your Honour, please just stand down in custody.
Police investigations led to a modest home on a quiet street in the small city of Dunedin, south of Christchurch. Tarrant lived here virtually unnoticed in the 18 months before his arrest. Tarrant's house is now at the centre of the biggest police investigation in New Zealand's history. The question confronting police and intelligence agencies is, how did he manage to fly completely under the radar while planning a mass murder? And have authorities been so focused on Islamic extremism that they've underestimated another deadly threat, the rise of white supremacists around the world? In Australia, police are focusing on northern New South Wales, including Grafton, where Brenton Tarrant grew up.
And I, like you, am absolutely shocked to the core that this could happen on our doorstep, but it has. And the ramifications have spilled over into the broader community of Grafton. And honestly, friends, our hearts are truly broken.
Grafton is a small but very traditional country town. It's very much a homogenous Anglo culture. It's unusual to see a person at the shopping centre who's not Anglo. If the town is very homogenous, then you're not used to seeing anybody other than somebody who looks like yourself. And if that is being fed somewhere along the line by some nasty website that's blaming the Muslims or the Afghans or whoever for our problems, then you can sort of see well, they don't actually have the cultural literacy skills to actually navigate that cesspool that they've or whirlpool that they've got themselves caught up in.
Tarrant's father drove a garbage truck. His mother was a teacher. Friends describe an awkward boy, obsessed with computer games, who was picked on at school for his weight.
I don't know Brendan particularly, so I don't know what his success rate at school was like and so on, but he clearly was somebody who didn't go on to university. He got very involved in the gym and personal fitness and so on. He got a job eventually working in a gym. He was obviously going to the gym. He got into one of those programs where you become a personal trainer.
Becoming a gym junkie was life-changing for Tarrant. In 2011, he boasted online, "I run fitness classes with 20+ people daily who do nothing but stare, ask questions and mimic my movements for 60 minutes. And I enjoy it. My self-respect is through the roof. I can truly do anything I put my mind to. I am a goddamn monster of willpower. I just need a goal or object to work towards." In another post, he wrote, "There is more to life than money, but while ever I work, I do not have time to do what I truly enjoy doing, playing video games, snorting coke, and hiring strippers."
It fits a bit of a profile in terms of white supremacists and right-wing extremists, that they, more often than not, have not achieved any particular success in terms of their professional or personal lives. In a sense, you can say that what they're looking is for something to take their frustrations out with. Frustrations about a range of different things.
When Tarrant was 20, his father took his own life while battling mesothelioma. Tarrant left Grafton. His travels took him to New Zealand, Southeast Asia, China, North Korea, and later Turkey, Europe, Africa, and Pakistan, and exposed him to a whole new world of ideas.
Well, we understand that he was the beneficiary of a large inheritance, and for whatever reason, he decided to spend a lot of time and money travelling. There is nothing untoward about a number of the places that he's gone. North Korea does stand out. That is not a tourist destination and it's not a business destination.
Tarrant was in Europe in April 2017 when an Uzbek asylum seeker and suspected Islamic State sympathiser drove a truck into a department store in Stockholm. The attack killed 5 people, including an 11-year-old girl. Tarrant became fixated on this attack. He was obsessed with immigration levels in Europe, the history of Europe's wars, and the delusion that the white race was being overrun.
He talks in his manifesto about being radicalised by seeing Muslims in France in particular, and that he also visited a number of famous historic battle sites in Europe. In the manifesto and in what he says, he seems to be tapping into much more of a white supremacist European narrative rather than an Australian or an American narrative. And in particular, he refers to Anders Behring Breivik, who carried out a horrendous bombing and gun massacre in Oslo in 2011.
Tarrant's travels coincided with the rise of an increasingly aggressive right-wing movement across Europe and the United States. It erupted in Charlottesville, Virginia in August 2017. The scenes evoking Nazism revealed a movement that had largely been hiding in the darker corners of the internet.
Charlottesville was a seminal moment for the global far right because it proved that the internet has given them the ability to mobilize a large number of people and to have a large real-world impact in a way that they hadn't for decades prior to the rally. In the early 2000s, a couple of dozen people at a single Klan or neo-Nazi gathering would have been huge. Hundreds of people showed up from all around the United States and all around the world at Charlottesville. And this is because the internet has given them the ability to disseminate their propaganda to a wider audience and to organize in a way that would have been impossible in an earlier age, because there's just not enough of them in any one given city or area.
You got someone that's like so angry and upset and isolated in the community, they're not going to go to the local tennis club and talk about all the bad things that are going for them in the world. So the only place that these people can currently find, is these groups online.
It has been a game changer for these groups, and the ability to be anonymous, the ability to convey their views cheaply, to do it one-to-many, to do it instantaneously. We have got some major questions to ask about extremist politics, in this case, white supremacist extremist politics, and the role of social and online media. It has been a disaster in terms of encouraging them and enabling them.
We're a lucky country. We've seen what happens in other countries, in Europe.
The far right was also emerging out of the darkness in Australia.
Wherever Islam goes, there is trouble.
After the Lindt Cafe siege in December 2014, Reclaim Australia made a name for itself, capitalising on rising Islamophobia.
They are not loyal Australians.
The far right extremist groups, really did start coming out, with more confidence and online presence, after and around the Lindt Cafe, and the federal election, especially with, Pauline Hanson, people were supporting her, when banning Muslim immigration and things like that.
Nation lives inside you, it flows through your veins, it is in your spirit, never forget it, and always remember the strength, the honour, and the mateship that makes us who we are. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie! Aussie, Aussie, Aussie! Thank you.
With the upsurge of Islamic terrorism, that has been used by some of those people who have long been involved in the white supremacist right-wing extremist milieu to try to promote their views and potentially get some recruits.
If you want to see what a fascist looks like, they're right over there.
More militant groups splintered off from the movement. One anti-Islam hate group, the United Patriots Front, had more than 100,000 Facebook followers, including Brenton Tarrant. On Saturday, the ABC's background briefing revealed that in a 2016 Facebook comment, Tarrant praised the UPF's then leader, neo-Nazi Blair Cottrell, as his emperor.
I think that the fact that the shooter was commenting on neo-Nazi Facebook pages absolutely should have tripped an alarm. And again, I would ask you to consider if this person had been registered with the government as owning a substantial number of firearms and a substantial amount of ammunition, and had been commenting on a radical Islamic Facebook page that specifically advocated for holy war. I think the government of New Zealand and the government of Australia would absolutely have been looking into this person before the shooting. He would not have been an unknown quantity.
Unfortunately, it's not surprising that the shooter was an Australian. We, in this country, unfortunately have a very robust right-wing extremist community. We have groups I won't give their names, but we have a number of groups in Melbourne, in Sydney and elsewhere who are well known to the police and the security services, who have been engaged in various propaganda activities, training in the bush, carrying out leafleting and graffiti activities, and generally trying to raise awareness around white supremacist or neo-Nazi ideology. Some of them are linked in some ways to the outlaw motorcycle gang culture. Many are not. Some of them come from the skinhead groups, others don't. But there's, I would say, conservatively 300 to 500 people that have been identified by state police or Commonwealth organisations as potentially a threat.
In the past 4 years, Australian authorities say they've thwarted multiple right-wing threats. One man allegedly planned to bomb 3 targets in Melbourne. On the New South Wales Central Coast, a Nazi sympathiser was caught with a stockpile of guns after saying he wanted to commit a mass shooting.
How close did they come to actually happening?
Well, I think without the timely intervention of security forces, there is a strong likelihood that they would have proceeded with their plans. But you have to understand that we are talking about a relatively small group of individuals. They are not coordinated in the sense of a normal political structure. The names of the groups that they are involved in change. The people in those groups regularly have fallouts with each other. The reality is that with the extreme right wing in this country, a number of the more violent crimes that they have been associated with have been crimes of violence against each other, and including homicides.
The white nationalist movement also has deep roots in New Zealand, where the country's intelligence services warned for years it's drastically underfunded.
Christchurch is the ground zero for the extreme right in New Zealand. They'd had that reputation from the 1970s, and certainly through the 1990s. I have always struggled to convey to New Zealanders the fact that A, they were here, and B, they were expressing extremely violent views about their fellow citizens, and C, that there was always the potential amongst those communities to enact the violence that they had articulated in documents or online.
There are now concerns that authorities in the West, preoccupied with the rise of Islamic extremism, failed to grasp the threat from the far right.
When ISIS began to expand in 2013-14, they had a significant internet component to the caliphate. They recruited thousands of foreign fighters using the internet, using Twitter and Facebook, and they spread an enormous amount of propaganda via social media. And there was a massive global effort both on behalf of these technology companies and on behalf of global law enforcement to shut that down. And it was extremely successful. We have not seen anything close to the same sort of response and the same sort of concerted effort to stop the spread of far-right fascist propaganda on the internet and on social media, nor have we seen the same kind of monitoring in the spaces where they gather.
The scale of hate speech has hit new highs. And while we're reading some of the material coming from these groups and being absolutely appalled at it, it's actually symptomatic of what we're seeing on a wider scale across the social media, where we are seeing what frankly is tantamount to a criminal offence. We have not had a lot of prosecutions that I'm aware of in relation to people sending hateful and arguably illegal messages threatening people. And I think that there's a case for that to be reviewed and improved.
In late 2017, Tarrant settled in Dunedin. He rented a house where neighbours say he kept to himself.
My feeling is that he chose New Zealand because it was a soft target in terms of security. The event has raised some real issues around gun control and gun licensing in this country. So it might be that he chose it because he could access the firearms that he required, and perhaps he chose it to make a point. I mean, perhaps he chose it to illustrate that even a relatively tolerant, quiet society on the very edge of the world was not immune to terrorism.
Tarrant obtained a gun licence and joined the Bruce Rifle Club south of Dunedin. It's a small club with just over 100 members. Ray McClellan has lived near the club for the past 16 years.
It's one of the only 600-metre ranges left in New Zealand, I believe, and so I imagine they would be going for accuracy over range and stuff like that with a variety of weapons, and that's what they tend to practice.
What's the history and significance of the club to New Zealand?
It's I believe, the oldest incorporated rifle club in New Zealand, and I'm not too sure, but I think it was originated from the old days of the militia, when various communities organised militia and stuff like that, and they set it up, and it's just gone on from that, I guess.
In this tiny rural community, locals are used to the sound of gunshots coming from the Bruce Rifle Club. But one neighbour's told us that just 3 weeks before the Christchurch massacre, there was a sustained barrage of gunfire like nothing she'd heard before. In her words, it sounded like war breaking out. Members of the Bruce Rifle Club told Four Corners they saw no signs that Tarrant was dangerous. The club is feeling shocked, stunned, betrayed and used that we've had this person in our club who's used our facilities. Our hearts and our sympathies go out to the friends, family and loved ones of the victims and the people of Christchurch. Police have spent days searching Tarrant's house. He had barely any furniture and his lease was due to run out at the end of this month. It was here that he wrote the final version of his so-called manifesto, inspired by Norwegian far-right mass murderer Anders Breivik.
Well, I think it's a copy of the Breivik manifesto, which he published at the time of the killings in Norway. And at times it's incoherent, at times it's a rant. There's elements that are difficult to understand, but it also has the characteristics of modern supreme right views about the world and the clash between white Western societies and Islam and Muslims. So you see there the classic arguments about the threat to our, quote, white, unquote, civilization, the threat in terms of the replacement theory, which is at the core of what he believes, which is the idea that Muslims are outbreeding whites, but they're also providing a cultural and economic threat.
My hunch is that this manifesto, which I'm not going to read, and I hope nobody will read it, because we don't want to give oxygen to that sort of hatred, I presume it's been cobbled together with stuff from different web sources, and it's him, you know, for 70-odd pages, spewing out his hatred and his prejudice.
The Christchurch shooter's specific part of the internet that he came from was a message board called 8chan, and specifically a chunk of 8chan called /poll. Now, 8chan is one of the 5,000 or so largest websites on the internet, so it's quite popular. And I would describe 8chan and other similar sites as almost a 24-hour-a-day Klan or neo-Nazi rally, where every now and then someone will leave in order to commit a violent attack.
On Wednesday the 13th of March, 2 days before the massacre, Tarrant flooded Facebook with posts on extreme right-wing themes. That same day, he posted photos on Twitter of guns and magazines covered with symbols of his fascist ideology.
Should have raised the alarm. If there were the appropriate agencies looking where they should have been looking. But as we've subsequently learnt from looking at the situation in New Zealand, that the competent authority in New Zealand appears to be struggling with its capability. So they are not particularly well served in terms of resources, and this is a very resource-intensive activity.
The day before the attack, Tarrant updated his Facebook profile with the slogans "I am Hope" and "New Zealander of the Year." At midday on the day of the attack, he posted links to his manifesto on Facebook. At 1:28 p.m. on the online message board 8chan, he announced what he called an attack against the invaders and provided a link to a Facebook live stream. 3 minutes later, he emailed his manifesto to 70 addresses, including the office of New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. At 1:40 p.m, he walked into the mosque.
The moment I first heard about it, I knew it would probably be some kind of white supremacist or neo-Nazi type attack. What I didn't expect was how sort of flippant and sarcastic and ironic the shooter would be. And when I saw the video in particular, I realised that we were dealing with something quite new.
On the 8chan message board, the live-streamed attack was celebrated.
As he began to kill people, I would describe the result of the other users on 8chan/pollboard as riotous glee. They were incredibly happy, incredibly excited to be witnessing so many people being killed, so many Muslims being killed. If global law enforcement had been monitoring that board and watching when this person began his attack and posted his video, he was driving to the site of the attack for something like 6 minutes before he began shooting. You could clearly hear over the audio of his video the GPS directions telling anyone listening where he was going. If law enforcement from the United States or from Great Britain had been, dealing with this the way they deal with Islamic terror, which is where they communicate with one another, someone could have reached out to law enforcement in New Zealand and warned them about what was going to happen and cut down the response time before armed police units arrived to intercept him significantly.
The fact that a 17-minute video was uploaded and then Facebook had to take down 1.5 million showings of that. And I would point out that they took down 1.2 million on upload. That leaves 300,000 that have been online for some time. I think it raises some fundamental questions about us as a society. Have we invested enough in social cohesion? Did we know enough about what was happening in our community? And of course, for me, one key question is, we are never ever going to say again that New Zealand doesn't have extreme right-wing activists.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر
3 days ago, thousands gathered for Friday prayers in the park across the road from Al Noor Mosque.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
Islamophobia kills. Muslims have felt its pain for many years. Islamophobia is real. It's a targeted campaign to influence people to dehumanize and irrationally fear Muslims, to fear what we wear, to fear the choice of food we eat, to fear the way we pray, and to fear the way we practice our faith. We call upon governments around the world, including New Zealand and the neighboring countries, to bring an end to hate speech and the politics of fear.
A community besieged by distrust and hate is praying for a turning point.
Do you think you would return to the mosque again?
Definitely I will. I wouldn't feel easy, but definitely I will. If we abandon the mosque, we give him what he wanted, and we should not do this. Seeing the response of the community, seeing the response of the community in New Zealand gives us strength. People are wonderful, and they're standing with us. But it wouldn't be easy, though. I mean, we'd definitely go back, but we'll never feel safe.